Okay, so we're doing a little bit of analysis on West End blues from 1928, Louis Armstrong's version, and we're going to focus on accompaniment in this video. So accompaniment is usually talked about with texture, so polyphony, homophony, monophonic, that kind of sound. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, but for jazz, the rhythm section is a critical part of the accompaniment, and each time an era changes in jazz, the rhythm section changes a lot. So we need to talk a little bit about rhythm sections and what's happening with rhythm sections, and I'll give you a little bit of a background of how that works. So we're going to start off with that, and then we'll get into the more in-depth analysis of this particular song. So here we go with some random piano examples. So first up, we have sort of ragtime blues and trad jazz, which has a kind of ragtime piano sound to it. So it sounds a bit like this. So that sort of happens, and that's kind of in West End blues. We get that sound a little bit. Then we would move into a big band era where we get a walking bass line, we get a guitar going in the middle going chomp, 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 and then the piano is doing almost the complete opposite, where it's doing almost nothing. It's just in these tiny little fills. So I'll play the same chord progression. I'll try and show you how that would sound. So we get the swing sound. So just that little high bit is all the piano would be doing in big band swing, just tiny little fills, and the walking bass line would be doing the walking and the guitar in the middle. Then we get onto bebop. In bebop, we're playing much faster, and we add a lot more chords in. So the same progression might sound something like this with the piano playing chords in the middle and no guitar. So it would sound like. You know, you're really getting much more complex sound in bebop, and then in cool jazz, which kind of comes after that, you kind of go back the other way. It's quite arranged, it's slower, it's softer tones, and you get a more complex bass line. So it might sound something like this. It's not the best example, but you kind of get the idea. The bass is moving around, it's softer, it's slower, it's a bit more, what do we call, a bit more modal in the harmony. Okay, so that's a bit of an idea of how the accompaniment changes throughout jazz. And what we have in West End blues is some sort of a hybrid of some of those styles. So let's get into it. Okay, so here, let's have a quick look at what's happening. So with the texture, we can see here we've got three parts that are all playing melodies independently, except for maybe the first four bars. And so because of that, we're going to say this is polyphony. Lots of parts. Now this bottom part here, because this doesn't really fit the polyphony, what we say is that the piano and the guitar, or the banjo in this case, are providing a rhythmic and harmonic foundation. So they are not contributing to a melody at all. They're almost functioning as a drum beat that's in tune, almost a timpani, I guess. So rhythmic and harmonic foundation, which is quite unique to this style of jazz. Later on, they might add more parts in. Okay, so that's that. What we can also, on a different note here, look at, which is interesting, is you'll see, I've got rid of everything. We've got this chord here, which is kind of a complex chord. And just some tips for you here with jazz chords. There's really only four chords. That is major 7, minor 7, dom 7, and the one that would be missing here, which I'll do in a second, is one question mark chord here. So if we were spelling these out, we'd have 1, 3, 5, 7. Then we'd have 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7. 1, 3, 5, flat 7. And then if you can work it out, the one that would be missing, which is added in, is 1, flat 3, 5, major 7. That would be called a minor major 7. Now, the reason I say that is because everything else is then told to you. If the chord has a sharp 5 in it, then they have to tell you. If it has a sharp 9, they have to tell you. And so a sharpen means raise. So we're saying this one here is a dominant chord because we just get rid of dominant and just put 7. And then this is a raised 5th. So that's how that chord comes about. Okay, hope that's helpful. Let's move on to some more accompaniment. Oh, wrong screen. Okay, so here we're just going to quickly analyze the start of the song here. What I wanted to point out here is that it's assumed that Dixieland and trad jazz is all improvised. So the trumpet or cornet plays the melody, and then the clarinet and trombone improvise all these different parts. But a couple of things here. One is you can see that the clarinet here is playing a really perfect harmony, following along exactly the same. And also this quote here, I've just put this quote in to kind of show you, this is Earl Hines, the piano player, talking about this recording. He said, we spent hours in there recording it. So it wasn't like they did a one recording, they improvised and went, oh, that's good enough. They spent a long time trying to get it right. They're talking here in this little quote just about the cymbal not being right. So I think they cared about how it was, and it wasn't just fully improvised. Just something to sort of be aware of there. All right, let's move on. Okay, so the next 4 bars. Okay, now you can see up here the melody here by Louis Armstrong tends to go off into its own direction there. It's doing its own thing. And so I think that's hard now for the clarinet and the trombonist to harmonise or follow along. And so what they do instead is they do a thing called guide tones. And guide tones, like this, are the 3rd or 7th of the chord. So you can see here the trombone is playing the 3rd, and then does some other things up where have we got some more things. Well, I'll get into that in a second. So there's some sort of guide tones. That's what it'd mean today. However, back in the day when they're recording this, 7ths of the chord weren't as common. So what you got is you got a lot of A flat 6s or E flat 6s. So I'll quickly show you the sound of that. The 6th chord sounds a little bit more old-fashioned as opposed to the 7th chord. So a major 7 sounds like this, and the 6th chord sounds like this. So if you play that in context, you can kind of hear how that's an older sound. And so rather than the 3rd and 7th, they're playing the 3rd and 6th here. And there's the 6th again. And then here it becomes just sort of some sort of harmony. Here we've got the 6th again, because that's a more appropriate thing for the chord. You can see here is another little interesting thing about guide tones. So if you happen to be a jazz student, you might play guide tones as semibreves. That's a very common thing to do. But in this early jazz, they were better than that, and they playing a little leading lines and variations into the guide tones, just to make it a little bit more interesting. You can see here, for example, there's quite a bit going on as opposed to just semibreves. Trombone's playing semibreves, given, but the clarinet's doing some things. Also, I reckon that there's a little bit of compositional devices happening here. That part and that part are very similar, perhaps a little bit of imitation going on there. So that's just something to be aware of. Again, it's still guide tones. Other fun things is you've got the trombone here and here playing higher than the clarinet. Not that important, but just an interesting little fact. And then finally on this page, something that's worth looking at, I might get rid of that, is that down here we've got a thing called a turnaround, which is a way of getting back to the start of the tune. So in a 12-bar blues, or really in any jazz song, the song usually ends here 2 bars or 1 bar before sort of the end of the form, or the melody ends there, and then you have a bit of space to get back to the starting chord any way you like. You can put any sort of cadence in there, we might say, you like. And so we've loosely got here, for example, F7, and then I guess this is F minor 7. I mean, it's a bit hard to hear what's actually happening, but something like that. And then over here again we've kind of got 2-5-1, so, and that leads us back to the sound. So that's kind of this sound. So So like, I guess in some ways almost like a perfect cadence. So that's a turnaround that's happening there. Another little interesting jazz thing. Moving along. Here we're going into the next 12 bars, the second stanza. A couple of interesting things here is the trombone is playing what I think is the melody as opposed to an improvisation. The reason I say that, I think I've said in another video that the singers sing this second verse as such. They sing these notes that the trombone plays. And in King Oliver's version, he also plays similar notes. Interesting again that these melody notes are the minor third and major third stuck together. Oh, major third, which is that real common thing, I guess, that the blues and jazz kind of invented, is this blues third or minor third, and it's really evident here in the trombone, which is actually sliding between the minor third and major third, so quite an unusual thing there. Also, we have here different chords being played. The piano player is playing a rudimentary 2-5-1 there, so another little bit of an interesting thing. Moving along. Okay, so looking at some more stuff here, this is probably one of my favourite sort of compositional device things that I've ever come across. So I'll just quickly explain why I like it. It's because it's not super neat. It's quite organic and it's melded together. And what we have is we have two devices, which is imitation and call and response, just merging together seamlessly. And I think that's better than sometimes how we might apply it ourselves as students. We might go, this part's going to be imitation, this part's going to be call and response. Here it's merged together. So you can see imitation being the same melody in a different voice. So up here, it's just a copy. It's just a copy. But then this one here, and then from then on, becomes sort of a call and response. This bit, and then Louis Armstrong just starts doing his own thing. And I love it because it starts out as one thing and then it becomes another, and I just think it sounds great. I really enjoy it. Another little fun thing here, or interesting thing, is this chord down here. Suddenly we're getting a minor chord as part of the blues progression. This becomes part of the blues progressions later on. So it's just something to be aware of, that there's a change in chords there. All right, next. Oh, let's nerd out a bit in some piano world. So not a lot to say here. We go into a piano solo. The really only point I want to make here is that in Piano Land we have a thing called ragtime, where we play a single note in the left hand and a chord in the right hand. So it sounds a bit like this. What key are we in? E flat. Reasonable example. But what we have here is we actually have stride piano. Stride piano is where you play a tenth in the left hand and then you play the chord as well. So it just sounds a little fuller, and you get some walking lines like, can we see one here? You can see you're starting to get these sort of walking lines here and here. Which sort of become then the walking lines of big band jazz. So it sounds a little bit more interesting. Might be, I'm going to do it in a different key. So, I'll do it slow. And then with some walking lines. So I hope that helps him. There's a bit of stride piano there as opposed to ragtime piano. All right, let's look at what have we got. Oh, some questions. Here we go. So what kind of questions might we get? A common question is outline the role of the rhythm section, or describe how the rhythm section's functioning. So for this example, we've already talked about it. The piano and banjo are providing the rhythmic and harmonic foundation, as opposed to independently comping would be something else we might say in jazz. So that's what's happening there. Locate and label a compositional device. So we just went through that. So hopefully you could do that. That's a good little question. And describe the texture. So a real common example there. So, you know, there's some good questions. And I'm going to finish with a personal favourite of mine. I've seen this many times and hopefully you can work it out. But let's have a look. Name this chord. Okay, let's do this. So what's happening here is a few things. First off, we've got to work out the transpositions. So this guy and this guy are B flat instruments, which means we can tell that as well because the key signatures are changed compared to that. So we've got to change the key signatures or change these notes. So this is a C at the moment, but if we want to put it back in concert, this would be a B flat here. Maybe we'll just write B flat. This note here would be an F sharp. Yeah, let's call F sharp. And then the other ones are right. Now, if you want to name this chord, my suggestions are, what you've got to do is you've got to turn it back into a triad form, into thirds. So if it's not in thirds, you're not going to be able to name it. So if we quickly work out the rest of these notes, we've got D and B flat, and then we make ourselves a staff. Oh, ugly. Now we've got to try and guess where these notes would do to make a third. Luckily, they happen to make a third. So we get rid of the double, don't need that one, and then we would write this out like so. Then we would label it, or now we'd do some analysis. So we'd go, oh, this is the first of B flat, this is the third of B flat, and then this one up here is something weird, we're not sure. That's definitely not the fifth of B flat. It's been raised by a semitone, so we might call this the sharpened fifth. And then hopefully you'll know that a 1, 3 and raised fifth makes an augmented triad. So we would say this is a B flat augmented triad. So look, another little piano player nerd out for you, but accompaniment and chords, they all go together. So I hope this is helpful, and I'll see you soon.